are now entering the horror sanctum.
Hello and welcome back to the Horror Sanctum podcast. I'm Jay, along with the usual suspects, John, Kellen, and TJ. Our newest picture comes from John, 2001's Slashers. Never heard of it, neither had any of us aside from John. But that's what this show is all about, exploring both films that we love and those that we have yet to discover. Slashers, which was directed by Maurice Devereaux, follows 6 random contestants as they're put into a game show where they'll face evil clowns, evisceration happy doctors, and wild maniacs. John, let's get started.
Yeah, so where did I find this weird ass movie? This started for me like right around 2004. I was going to Hollywood Video a lot. That's going to be a reoccurring theme on the podcast. So I found this. I was with a friend and we rented it, just kind of a blind rental. We thought it looked really interesting, watched it, and we kind of loved it at the time. I mean, the first time we rented it, I think we watched it like maybe 3 or 4 times. At the time, it didn't occur to me a lot of the stuff then of what they were doing now. I think just because even though I was in the film, I wasn't as into analyzing things as much back then. But I mean, you watch the movie and just based on your synopsis, it's kind of like an homage to like The Running Man and like Battle Royale, things like that, which is funny because Battle Royale came out, I think, in 2000. So I'm guessing it was before this movie, but you might could argue that they were being made close to the same time. It's not the same premise, but it's kind of interesting to think about that timeline. And of course, this is kind of like a satire on like extreme reality TV, Japanese game shows. I'm pretty sure it didn't get a theatrical release.
Really
but no. The budget was like, from what I read online, it was like I think it was under 200,000. I don't think it did really well on DVD. I wish I still had the DVD because the DVD had a lot of cool extras and behind the scenes on the film that's just kind of really hard to find online, a lot of the information on it. Watching it again, it's very long. I saw 2 different versions of the film. I watched the YouTube version that we all watched, which is the movie that I remember watching on the DVD. And then I watched a longer version that was better quality that I didn't realize was a longer version until I got into it. And I was like, wait a minute. And it was a lot of like extra dialogue, a lot of extra characterization moments, a lot of stuff that's just silly, like really silly character bits and things that just didn't really need to be in a movie that probably didn't need to be anyway. But it's, the movie itself, the premise is interesting, but it's very soap opera, right? The acting is like a soap opera. It's shot like a soap opera. It looks like an episode of, Young and the Restless. There's a lot about this movie though that after watching it, I came to this realization that even though I think it doesn't work as a whole, I think if you took this movie and you made it into like a stage play, I think it could work. Because I think there's enough oddness to it and enough of that character interaction to where it probably could work as like a musical or like a stage show. I don't think anyone's ever going to do it, but I don't know.
Very little small town theater production for sure.
Exactly. One thing that I did notice that I forgot years ago was the 2 guys who play. So the 2 characters, Chainsaw Charlie and Preacher Man. It's the same actor. I'd totally forgotten about that. He's just playing two different characters. And I
Uh,
remember, yeah, and I remember reading, like watching these interviews with him on the DVD where he was talking about getting into these characters and things like that. And it was kind of fascinating just to hear like his process at the
I
time.
think they ripped off the Chainsaw Charlie, because Chainsaw Charlie, when Terry Funk come back to the WWF and the Attitude Era and tag teamed with Mick Foley, Mankind, he
Yes.
come back as Chainsaw Charlie, holding a chainsaw and pantyhose over his head, and that was in
Yes.
1998. So I think they ripped that off.
They might have. One interesting thing is so you see in the movie where Chainsaw Charlie breaks character on the bridge when the big guy calls him out, the bouncer guy on the bridge attack, and you see him break character and he takes off the facade of the hillbilly. There is a deleted scene, and I remember seeing this. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it online where you do see the preacher man character break too when he's on top of the girl when they're off the commercial break.
Yeah.
He cuts like he's talking and he's got like this. I remember it was this very cartoony like New York accent. It's like the most like Dick Tracy New York cartoony accent imaginable. I remember that, but I just couldn't find it online, so I was gonna definitely send it. But yeah, I mean, I don't like I don't hate the movie. I do like it, but I think that there's obviously a lot of problems with it. The acting is the biggest thing. I am curious to what you guys think though. I go TJ, what do you think? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I didn't love it.
What?
No.
I don't even know that I would say I like it, but I mean the premise has potential. I mean, obviously they're kind of culling from a good premise that had, even at this point in time, been done before. Initially, the very first thing you already mentioned that it put me in mind of was Running Man. If you were running from like 80s slasher characters, I did think it was interesting that probably because of copyrights and stuff, they couldn't like outright say that there was Jason and Freddy and all these things, even though they had a hallway where those characters actually are. They just can't kind of name them, I guess. But obviously, Chainsaw Charlie's, Leatherface stand-in, and the other ones are just amalgamations of other things. But I don't know. I felt like I didn't love those slasher characters that they settled on. I like a chainsaw yielding guy. He was probably my favorite of the three, but I thought there was a lot more potential with like maybe the preacher character, or I wanted somebody in a better mask or something. I don't know. I felt like that premise, even with the terrible acting, if they had settled on maybe three better, even if they were just knockoffs of the famous slashers, just blatantly, I felt like there was more potential there for that to be a little more interesting, even if they were just, continuing to harp on the conventions that they're already harping on. Just go whole hawk with it. But obviously the acting is painful. I mean, like, make your eyes bleed, painful, and ears bleed. Especially the main girl who survives, the final girl. From the first frame, you want her dead. And I think that's the thing that makes this movie not work the most. I mean, no one in this film is a good actor, but her grading, like trying to be sad and upset, but also I'm like a hippie with a purpose, but also, yeah, I'm still just in this game, and I need you to protect me, but I also don't know what's going on, but I totally know what's going on because I knew somebody who was in this. It's just her motivations are all over the place, and then she's the characters are paper thin. I do like the overall concept, though. I mean, I think in the hand with a bigger budget, with the hands of a director that's not just shooting on Sony digital video or whatever they had, This is like one step above in the 80s when they used to just shoot on VHS. But I mean, you could tell it's low budget, so I'd make some allowances for that they had minimal sets. They did what they could do with it. Obviously did steal a lot from Battle Royale, because they even had like the exact same collars. They just didn't like make their heads explode. They just shocked them. I remember in the early 2000s, there was a lot of things being shot on digital video in those early days of digital video, when it became cheaper to do that. A lot of horror films, and they were trying to do like different takes on reality. I mean, that was the era that Halloween Resurrection come out in 2002, the next year, where they're using the live footage, kind of early days of the internet streaming show kind of thing. There was a lot of stuff that did that. The thing I think did it the best in that same era, around 2002, was a little independent film called My Little Eye. I don't know if anybody's seen that, but it's kind of like a little hidden gem. I don't think any film from that era did it any better. They were working with similar budgetary constraints, young actors. They just hired better actors and had a better script. I mean, that's ultimately the thing that most of these films that are so forgettable just didn't have. They had the pieces of a thing to make it good. They just didn't all come together that great.
Right.
I mean, so it had such potential, but you can tell there's heart behind it, because I mean, yeah, there's no one great kill scene, because of the budgetary constraints. They have to cut away from like what would be the best moment in any of the kills, and then you just see like the last second or two of the thing, like when they cut the girl in half. You don't see the money shot in any of those things, or when they cut the people's heads in half. It obviously is a dummy, but there is a charm to that too, because it reminds me that these are the people in this generation that grew up watching those crappy, made for video store rental 80s slasher knockoffs, and this is just what they're doing 20 years later. They're doing their version of that, only they're playing with the new conventions of like a digital internet, or like underground TV show type thing that some other things have also tried to kind of do. So all that being said, it's not a great film. It feels about 30 minutes too long, but probably is legitimately at least 20 minutes too long. If this was an 80-minute film, a lot of that stuff would be more forgivable. It's kind of the same thing we said about Theater of Blood, right? It just drags on too long. You get the idea of what's going on. You see the end from the beginning. It wasn't like a big shock to me that the other not muscular kind of Jim Carrey-ish white dude was undercover bad guy kind of thing. You could kind of see that coming from
he was kind of obvious.
Yeah. And you knew that girl was going to be the final girl, and and that all the people were going to die. I mean, so much of this plot was culled from the Running Man, with the whole game show idea. I did think at that point in time it was novel that they were kind of culling the Japanese television show thing, because it was in that era that those things first started to kind of translate via cable and stuff. And we really got a sense of just how whacked out Japanese culture was with some of those crazy game shows and stuff. So it wasn't like out of the realm of possibility that in a alternate version of the future that something like this could happen, and they could call it, Super Fun Killy Show or something,
Right.
In fact, I think that's one area where just calling it slashers almost probably hurt it more in the marketing than anything. Because if they had have named it something like legitimately a Japanese game show would have named themselves, they'd probably have more interest in it. It's like that terrible movie that Joe Bob Briggs did a commentary for on the DVD years and years ago. It's a horrible movie, but the overly long title is like the incredibly messed up creatures that just stopped living and become mixed up zombies or something like that. just that title makes you want to watch it to see what's about. Terrible movie, not memorable, but the title would hook enough people to get some traction, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my first thoughts.
What you think, Jay? Well, I agree with the similarities to Running Man and Battle Royale. I love Battle Royale. I remember in college is when I first caught wind of that, and you couldn't get it anywhere. You had to go to CD Warehouse in Rivergate and say, "Hey, I want Battle Royale," and they get behind the counter, get out of a safe or whatever. Like, there you go. You have to show your ID and all that. But just knowing you had to go through that made you want to watch it. Slashers, you didn't have to go through that. I don't know how the hell you found this movie. You said Hollywood Video, where that was like my first real job is Hollywood Video. I don't remember seeing this one. If I did, I probably still would have passed on it. There's a few things that can kill a movie for me. One is runtime, which we've touched on already. It's 2 hours long. That's absurd. Like, not many movies need to be that long. This was one that did not need to be that long. Mm-hmm. Other thing I really despise in movies that can ruin them for me is the dialogue. We've talked about the acting, but the dialogue is so atrocious. And a lot of times it's just the character explaining why they're there. We know why you're there. You need money. The one girl was trying to fight a cause, which also cracks me up because I hate movies where people want to go do something, and then when it plays out the way they thought it was going to play out, they're like, what did I sign up for? What am I doing? I went on this game show where people die. Why are people dying? Like, I don't know if any of you seen Willow Creek, Bobcat.
Yeah.
Movie. Fantastic.
Great movie.
So this couple's going to look for Bigfoot. Surprise, they find Bigfoot. And then they're upset about it. I'm like, what? You obviously believe in Bigfoot enough to go do this. And then when you find Bigfoot, you freak out. Like, this is what you signed up. But back to
that was directed by Bobcat Goldthwait.
Yeah. My favorite, the dialogue ruined it for me, 100%. But I wrote down a couple quotes that just need to be written down and discussed. So my two favorite quotes were back to back. And it's where the one girl says, the last thing I need is you on my back because I took my top off. Why? She took her top off. She knew what she was doing. She was trying to get the big goon, to have the hot sport to help protect her. But after that, and she took her shirt off and she knew what she was doing. But after that, she said, stop thinking about my fucking boobs. Those two quotes back to back tell you all you need to know about this movie. I did enjoy Chainsaw Charlie. I see the similarities with past characters, but he was fun at least. Mm-hmm. The other two weren't. The doctor was very rapey. And
very rapey.
All the girls' shirts off. Like every time he was cornered with the girl, he's like, I'm taking that shirt off, girl.
That character looked like he would be that guy.
Yeah, it was horrible.
That's true.
He totally did. But yeah, the run. If your movie is going to be 2 hours long and it's going to be a low budget horror movie, the dialogue needs to at least click to some degree, and this one just didn't. So it made that 2 hours feel like 12, and that's a hard sell for me. I didn't hate it, like TJ. I didn't hate it, but will I ever watch it again? Yeah, probably not. It also reminded me of Rob Zombie's 31 to a degree, where everybody's getting chased. But
yeah, good point.
It's almost like a game show, but it's just a game show for rich people. But that's about it for me. Like, I just dialogue. That's my number one kill for the movie.
Well, that's kind of where it reminded me too. The game show for rich people type thing. Where they were talking about it being like the most bet on thing. That reminded me of the Squid Games, and which is also, I think, is it Japanese? No, that's Korean, but still.
Yeah, South Korean.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah,
good Korean.
Yeah, they're not making those in North Korea.
Yeah. They have the real Squid Games. They don't televise them.
Yeah,
probably so. Sadly.
Kellen?
Yeah, so never seen Battle Royale. Just want to go ahead and get that out of
Damn
the way.
it.
Once per episode. It's going to happen at least once per episode.
If you've seen Hunger Games, though, you've basically seen Battle Royale. I think there was a lawsuit
It's
over it.
very similar. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, I've seen all of those and read the books.
There you go.
Yeah, the obvious similarities between this and Running Man. I mean, it's a game show where, people are excited to watch people die, which I don't feel like you take the absurdity of Japanese game shows already, and then the world as a whole's general obsession with combat sports. I mean, who's to say in 20 years that there won't be this kind of show? I mean, I'm saying we're kind of trending in that direction anyway. I mean, we're getting desensitized via the internet. So, I mean, I can't say that this isn't a possibility in the future that we're going to be watching a Japanese game show where people, get murdered for money.
Have y'all seen, just non sequitur, have y'all seen the new thing that Dana White, the main UFC guy, has developed, where it's just slapping each other in the face as hard as you can?
Yeah, I saw that.
And I think that started in Russia, that whole thing, the slap competitions. This is a very Russian thing anyway.
Yeah.
But Chainsaw Charlie, obviously the highlight of the whole thing. I mean, of all of them that could act, which was very a small number, he was it. I mean, and I think that as a character would be great in a horror comedy.
Yeah.
With, just punchlines and one-liners and zingers and stuff like that. So that kind of made him feel out of place in this. Like the rest of them were more psychopaths, and he was just having fun murdering. I'm just out here with a chainsaw getting ready to murder people. No big deal.
He needs his own movie.
Yeah, for sure.
I would absolutely watch a Chainsaw Charlie horror comedy, which is funny because last week we watched a horror comedy that did it well. This week we watched one that just missed the mark repeatedly. And I think that's why you get the feeling like I don't hate this film, but I don't like it. It's because you can see where they just kept missing the mark. The feeling I kept getting through, and John touched on this, is, I mean, it was shot like a soap opera. And I kept getting the feeling while watching it that this was more for like the actors involved. Probably the way they got so many people to be involved was to say, hey, you can use this as part of your acting reel. This will be a movie you can add to it. And probably let the actors have a little leeway with their dialogue, which is why they focus so much on everybody's backstory. The escape room's kind of the same way. You get a little bit of each person's backstory as they move through the escape rooms. They just did it better and with less time. It wasn't so drawn out. So I kind of got the feeling that each actor was allowed a little leeway with their dialogue and tried to make the most out of it, which is what drugged this movie on, is the backstories at each one, where they stop and they tell this long backstory, which also fits into the reality TV now. A lot of the stuff that they touched on is true. Like, the girl taking her top off. Yeah, obviously that's going to be a boost for ratings, so they're going to leave her alone longer. Telling a touching backstory that gets people invested in the characters, where then maybe they'll bet more money or they'll be more involved in watching. That happens in, American Idol, X Factor, America's Got Talent. All of those shows always have that character that's now coming to the stage, such and such. I was born in a small town in Oklahoma, and I remember. I mean, those things are what pull people in. So they're touching on things that are based in reality. They just didn't know where to push the stop button.
Yeah,
they didn't know. And I mean, and part of it goes with the terrible acting. There's just so many bad actors trying to prove they can act when they got their 5 minutes in the movie to have their own moment.
Yeah, I feel like
also
so much of that stuff should have been subtext. They just made a 10-minute scene out of.
Yeah, and like I said, that's where I get to feel like the actors had a little control over their dialogue, because I think if you're trying to write a movie, you're not going to have it drawn out that much, unless you, as the writer, thought, I did a great job. People are really going to want to hear this, and spoiler alert, they didn't.
Yeah, it was almost like all the notes that the
nobody
writer
watching
wrote.
This movie said, I wish there was a little more substance. because that's all this movie was
Well,
dialogue wise.
And also, you have to. One thing that's kind of I thought about just watching it now is the director is a French Canadian, and he's making a movie about Americans in a game show in Japan. So there's a lot of you can definitely, like you guys were saying, there's a lot of obvious, like he doesn't get the culture, the dialogue. It's almost like he's forcing what he's seen on movies as dialogue versus what he actually understands in the culture.
Yeah.
Maybe it's weird, but
and with that is, all of the dialogue is what you would think each character would have as their dialogue. Like everything in this movie is super predictable. The MMA fighter she's also a thrill seeker. The army guy who thinks that, I'm tough enough to beat these guys. What doesn't make sense is that this is a game show in Japan. These killers have been, except for the preacher man, who was the new guy, the other ones have been there, but they all speak perfect English with no accent. So you would think that if these were killers in a Japanese game show, that they would be Japanese, but they just happen to be America, which I guess fits if you're trying to sell it to an American audience. You don't want, the killers running around screaming in Japanese.
Or maybe it was a
not being able to
subtext
understand
of
them.
all the serial killers are white Americans.
Hey, there's a lot of serial killers in Japan.
That's true.
But if you
the
remember
one part-
when you started watching this, you text us all and said, "Is there a dubbed version of this?"
Because I was like, I
Give it
can already
5 more
tell.
minutes, bud. 5 more minutes.
I was like, if I can already tell if I'm going to have to read the bottom of the screen for this whole movie, it's not happening. I'm just going to be sitting here like, I didn't watch it, guys. So they go with all the slasher cliches. Obviously the effects for what they were not bad. Like TJ said, they cut away from the meat of it, but you can tell that whoever was in the effects was really trying to show off. The one part of the movie that I thought was really, really interesting, and you don't think about it when you watch shows like Big Brother or Survivor or the Amazing Race, when they paused for commercial, they stopped. You don't think about that in reality TV, but there's moments in reality TV where the producers are like, hold that thought, get microphones better, get the camera at a better angle, because they want to catch a moment.
Mm-hmm.
In this, obviously they've got sponsors, they've got companies that are paying for advertising space, and instead of it just being one connected scene, they stop at the dramatic parts when preacher man's on top of the MMA fighter girl and he's about to stab her, and then you hear the voice come over and you realize that the collars aren't just to prevent them from trying to cheat. It's also to keep them in line so that they follow the quote unquote script of the show. So I thought that was kind of like actually a good touch in this movie, is showing that they pause, even with the scene where Chainsaw Charlie breaks, which I thought was an actual good scene. Also, probably the funniest scene in the movie was like, hey, you're serious? Like, it was so out of left field, which, John saying that they cut out the preacher man doing it made it even better, because if it had been done twice, it would have felt like they were forcing it.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's just one scene where you realize, okay, so Chainsaw Charlie is a character. This guy's killing people, but this is the character or persona that he's putting on for the viewers to become popular. So that they sell little Chainsaw Charlie action figures or posters or whatnot. So that scene where he breaks and it becomes real, like, you don't feel sympathy for him because he's literally trying to kill 4 people on a bridge, but his break makes it seem like, okay, so this is all a show. Every aspect of this is part of a show. These guys might be killers, but they're not a doctor, a preacher man, a chainsaw wielding maniac. They're just guys playing characters. So I did actually enjoy that. So
isn't that the scene where you realize too that the murderer people, the slasher people, also can be shocked and are being controlled?
Yeah.
That was a good
like
touch.
I said, it's all it shows that this is all part of a show. This isn't just it's not random things they've done for no reason. Like, it's planned out like a regular show. Like, there's obviously a room where there's producers and directors and writers that are telling them where to go with what, and they point to that often when they're talking about, like we need to do this because I've watched all the other episodes. And this is the format they follow, and if you do this, it's going to prolong you staying in it. So it's obviously it's a structured show about murder, which I thought was just kind of, they could have left that out. I mean, they had all the time in the world because the movie is entirely too long. And I think saying an hour and a half is still too long, TJ. I think this could have been an hour and 15 minutes tops, and it would have been a whole lot more palatable.
Totally.
There's just so much wasted space in the movie where it's like they didn't know how they either wanted to progress, or like I said, they were trying to give the actors a chance to shine. So, hey, we're not going to be able to pay you so much because we don't have a high budget, but put this in your acting reel.
But if you can get paid scale for a movie that took twice as long to film, you make a lot more money.
Right.
Which I doubt if they filmed this in Canada or wherever, I doubt that they were part of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah, probably not.
No,
probably not.
Definitely not. Not on this.
You could totally tell that Jim Carrey dude was Canadian though, because he had that Canadian accent.
And that was before I'm done. That was one of the things that, a lot of the horror cliches, but the biggest horror cliche that I can think of is if you don't see the death on screen, it didn't happen. That happens in TV shows, movies, everywhere you watch. If there is a action, comedy, drama, horror, doesn't matter. If you don't see the kill, they didn't die. And as soon as you heard him scream and they saw him on the floor, I was like, well, he's obviously the bad guy. I mean, you got the feeling because they didn't hide it well. But as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, well, he's obviously going to pop up and kill, the army guy. Which, like I said, is such a big cliche. Like, for once, I would like for somebody to die off screen and they go, oh, no, he is dead. But it happens every time. If you don't see it, it didn't happen. Yeah, that person will be back.
Mm-hmm. Now, any final thoughts before we get to our first kill, our favorite kills?
I think that I definitely think, obviously, this movie was already done better in the 80s, and it was called The Running Man. I think we would all agree there. Yeah. I mean, I
that's
think
the top 3 Schwarzenegger movie for me.
Oh, yeah.
I love The Running Man. I've probably seen that movie 20 times.
But I think
just the puns in it and the characters, it's so good.
Oh, yeah. It's wonderful.
Such a great cheesy 80s action movie.
That was top form for Schwarzenegger puns. The only movie that might give it a run for its money is Commando.
Yeah, Commando's awesome. I think, though, that with this, I don't hate it. I do really enjoy it in the what they were trying to do, but I just think this would work better as a play somehow. I think everything they were trying to do, it just doesn't work as a movie. I think
an 80-minute play.
Yes, an 80-minute play.
And that's with 5 minutes of opening sequence and end credits.
Right. Yeah. And better actors. That's definitely better actors. You've got to get better actors. But yeah. As far as my rating for it, I mean, I think 2004 me would have given it a high rating. Now, honestly, I would say 2.5 out of 5 is where I would land on it. I like it. I don't love it. I don't hate it.
Favorite kill?
No, what was your favorite kill, sir?
Probably the one where Chainsaw Charlie grabbed the girl on the wall and cut her in half. I think that was probably the best one because you actually, even though it was cheap, you could tell it was a prosthetic. It was actually, you saw it. Yeah. I think that was.
Did you see the chainsaw? Because I watched, full disclosure, I watched this on my phone and I could not see the chainsaw on my phone. I could hear it and I knew it was happening, but
yeah, I had the same deal.
The blade.
But the quality is only like 240p on that YouTube playlist I sent everybody. It's really, really grainy and hard to see, and it's darkly lit, probably on purpose.
Well, I do have a better version if you guys want to watch the 2-hour version.
Hard pass.
I agree with the kill. That was my favorite kill of the movie, even though it took like 10 minutes for him to get that chainsaw all the way through, which I guess maybe is more accurate than just the one fell swoop. But that definitely was my favorite kill. As far as my rating, I think originally I had a 2.5, but I dropped it down to a 2. Just that dialogue just wears me out. and like, so I took half a point away, so I gave it a solid 2. Kellen?
Yeah. My favorite kill is actually the douchey Jim Carrey Wish.com guy cutting his own head off because of how dumb and absurd that is that he would take those shears and just cut his own head off. I mean, he gave a 15-minute dialogue about how, you know, he was a serial killer anyway and he didn't expect to live. But just for like those shears to just pop his own head off, that's dumb. Like, I mean, I can't imagine having the willpower once the blades start to pinch to be like, and I'll just go to jail. So that was probably my favorite kill. Quick note: worst final girl ever. I'm sorry, there was just one of y'all touched on it. Just could. I was so hoping she would die. She just nothing. Her looks, the way she act, the whininess, the whole thing. Like,
I would have preferred
like
the serial killer
girl
dude be the final guy than her.
I would have preferred the girl dressed like the Statue of Liberty to just like pop up at the end and be like, surprise, and murder somebody. Her be the final girl. Anybody, like a random person in the crowd, just pop up and be like, it's me. But yeah, I don't hate this movie. I just don't like it. So I would give it a 2 as well.
All right, TJ.
Well, I'm starting to see a trend. I'm glad Kellen said the thing about the guy cutting his own head off, because that's actually my favorite kill too. Even though I appreciate that the cutting the girl in half has more of the, you know, the pig viscera or whatever they use to kind of fall out, and that's really the only time you see any guts in this movie, really. Mm-hmm. But the thing that
a whole lot of guts in the special in the deleted scenes that John sent. If you want to watch those, because I did.
Oh, you did?
Glutton for punishment.
Oh, you did? Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just rapey scenes.
Lots of gore in those.
Yeah.
No, it was just a lot of holding up intestines and bleeding from the throat. Gotcha. There is one where they're slitting the girl's throat and she's screaming the whole time. I'm like, come on. Yeah. At some point, once they got past the halfway mark, it'd be more gurgling, if anything.
Yeah, the voice box would be cut at some point. But the reason that the guy shearing off his own head is my favorite kill is not because of the kill, but it's immediately after the kill, the camera guy was like, oh yeah, we were just lying. None of that's actually going to count against you. And you just killed yourself for no reason and lost $60 million.
That was great.
Plot twist.
That's actually the best thing in the movie, I think, is that I just wish it happened to the girl and not the other guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has a 5.0 on IMDb, which would be 2.5 on our scale, and I can't get it there. I'm with you guys with the 2 out of 5. I don't hate it, but I don't like it, and I'm never going to watch it again. But I appreciate that it could have been a better movie, but wasn't.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks. 2 stars from the panel of experts for Slashers 2001, movie that no one had heard about except John. If you are listening to this and you knew about this movie, let us know, just because I'd be interested in anybody else. Because I know that I have some movies that I love that no one's ever seen or heard of. So, all right, so we slashed through that episode. Thanks for sticking with us. Our next episode is actually pre-selected. It was an episode. It was a movie that was in our bucket, but I actually luckily found it after like 4 tries. Our next episode is coming out on Monday, February 13th, so the day before Valentine's Day. So we're going to do the 2001, another 2001 movie. That's 3 in a row if you're keeping score at home. But the 2001 movie slasher Valentine. All-star cast. I say that seriously. This was in one of TJ's picks.
Yeah.
Actually, I've watched it recently, probably last year or 2. I remember loving it. I didn't love it the second time, so we'll see what the third time brings around.
I haven't seen this movie since I was like 20. So it's been a hot minute.
You're in for a good time. As always, you can find that streaming, or if you own it, or if you just go to McKay's and look for it, I'm sure you can find it, watch along with us so we don't spoil anything for you. But it has been since 2001. So spoilers are spoilers. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, and to whatever platform you're currently listening to us now. We would greatly appreciate that. And remember, sharing is caring. Tell your like-minded friends all about us so they can come listen and join the flock. And for this episode, that's going to do it. I'm Jay with John, Kellen, and TJ. And until next time,
Keep it spooky.
Later.